Welcome back. I am your host. I am attorney Stephen Leahy, and this is the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560. The answer. This is our what do we do now, Jim?
Don't ask me.
I know, because
I'm going to ask one guy.
Okay, go ahead, ask him.
And now here's that man with a head just crammed full of knowledge, Mr. Know-It-All.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Know-It-All, where the questions matter but the points don't. So Attorney Stephen Leahy gets about 700 points, and Jake gets 2.
But they don't matter, so it's all the same.
Jake wins.
It's kind of like what the...
Yay, Bernie.
I give you 2 points for having your tie showing underneath the collar.
This is kind of what you talk about, because you talk about numbers, and that's what I wanted to ask Mr. Glennon about numbers, because this is where we on this show we talk a lot about the pension plan and the Chicago problems, financial problems, taxes, all this stuff. And I wanted to ask, because he did a lot of bankruptcy work before he got into his current position. So I wanted to ask him about Chapter 9 is municipalities. I think it's inevitable that Chicago has to seek protection under the bankruptcy laws. What do you think?
Inevitable is exactly the right word. It's not a good thing. It's an unpredictable, bad situation to go into municipal bankruptcy. And it may not be imminent for many Illinois municipalities, but it is inevitable, because that's the only way to accomplish it.
Let me stop you there. Because you didn't. I said Chicago, but you said several municipalities.
Many. Yeah, dozens across the state. Sure.
Dozens across the state.
Sure.
Now, that's kind of a scary thing, isn't it?
It's terrifying. I think we have a disaster in motion, and that's what's going to happen eventually. The only way to sort this out is through a municipal bankruptcy.
Okay, so let's talk about municipal, because everybody knows that Detroit has filed bankruptcy, and they've had a tough time. I don't know if you're following that. Are you following that at all?
Yeah, I'm following it very closely. They've had a pretty good time since bankruptcy. They've got investment-grade credit. Chicago is rated junk. That's what bankruptcy's for. They just opened a new school system, reconstituted their school system. That's what we ought to be looking at doing in Chicago.
So we have a framework in which to do it. But there's some impediments, isn't there?
There is. First of all, the state legislature has to okay it, authorize it. Even though it's a federal law, no municipality in Chicago can do it. Well, the Democrats are very opposed to this because they don't want to see pensions getting cut as they could be in a municipal bankruptcy. And very interestingly, just recently, the Democrats' main lawyer on these issues published an article saying that the pension protection clause in our Constitution impliedly means that you can't authorize, as a constitutional matter, can't authorize municipalities here to go bankrupt. Well, if that's true, that means that you're forever and ever barred from any resolution of this, because they also want to block any constitutional amendment, and they probably could for many, many years, aside from the political difficulty of doing it. So the consequence of what they're talking about, and this is going to be the next article that I write on Wire Points, is that, sorry, you're stuck with it. The only changes you can make are trivial ones that the pensioners would voluntarily consent to. So you're damned for eternity to paying pensioners. And
they haven't really agreed to anything, to any changes, really, have they?
Absolutely nothing of substance. The ones that are up that Cullerton proposes are gimmicks. That might be a little bit overstatement. Maybe they could save $1 billion a year, but that's not much in the big picture.
Talk billion here, billion there. You talk about a lot of money.
Well, the best measure of this kind of recently, some economists at Stanford measured the total liability of all the state and municipal pensions, $375 billion. Now, and that's without health care, which is also constitutionally guaranteed. Our Supreme Court decided to make up out of thin air. Mm-hmm. So, you're talking $100,000 per household in Illinois. Well, most households can't afford to pay any dent in that. So households with any to do, it's many hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is impossible. They're not going to pay it. If you raise taxes enough to try to cover it, we'd have a ghost town.
So we're running out of time, but I wanted to also mention, because you mentioned about the Illinois Supreme Court, because there was an important decision about the Supreme Court about pensions, wasn't there?
Yeah, there have been several. And they basically, the short answer is that pensioners win. You cannot, under the pension protection clause in the Constitution, reduce pension benefits. And they went further and said that, healthcare, even though healthcare is not even mentioned in the Constitution, healthcare is a constitutional right. That added 50% to the state pension obligation. In the stroke of a pen, they added $50 billion, over $56 billion to the liability. That's just nuts. People have no idea how bad this is getting.
I can't say, when liberal justices want, they're always results oriented. If they were trying to fix it, they could have fixed. They don't follow the Constitution or anything else. But this, they're going to say, well, we're going to follow the Constitution.
One last question, Mark, right before, just where do you see, in one or two sentences, where do you see wire points going in the future? Where do you want it to be?
Covering the situation in detail, making the public aware of what a bad situation we have, and preparing for the worst.
Okay, well, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Mark,
it's a form of a term of endearment,
That's
right?
That's important stuff. I think people don't really realize the danger we're all in.
Nor does the press.
And I agree, that's their job. And
remember how dangerous it is if you don't get help when the IRS is coming after you. You could lose everything. And Opem Tax Resolution will be there to make sure that doesn't happen and be on your side. Visit ChicagoTaxTeam.com or or call 312-664-6649. Now give us a little break here, and afterwards we're going to be talking some sports here on AM 560.
The Answer.